Hi folks, this lesson is focused on feedback. Our learning target for this lesson is I can give specific and meaningful feedback to students. So for this lesson I had asked you to read a few different articles on feedback. Before we get started, I'd like you to think about when you've received feedback in the past, what types of feedback work for you? What makes you feel good about yourself? What makes you feel like you are more motivated to work and learn in whatever the topic area is? And on the flip side of that, what kinds of feedback make you feel bad about yourself or maybe less motivated to learn more about whatever the topic is? For myself, when I thought about feedback that's really effective, I think the best feedback that I've received usually happens within the realm of like sports or dance, because you can get that feedback like in a very hands-on way. Somebody can show you or actually move you so that you can feel it in your body as well as in your mind, and that to me is so much easier for me to have somebody show me. That's functional for me. So I usually like feedback that's not just written, but that's also visual in some way. And then feedback that doesn't make me feel good, that's probably like when you feel like the feedback is being given to you like as a judgment on you as a person rather than on your work that you're doing. So that can be a major challenge and drawback of feedback that we'll talk about a little bit more. Feedback is a reaction to, oftentimes given by the teacher, but it could be given by a peer or by the student themselves, reaction to a product or a performance of a task or skill. So usually given by somebody other than myself. I guess feedback to myself would be more like a reflection. So it's given from somebody from the outside, a reaction to a product or performance of a task or skill. It's a communication tool that we use for letting our students know where they are in relation to the learning targets that we have, and it should be used as a basis for improvement. So, when we're talking a lot about standards-based grading, and so feedback, as you probably noticed, is extremely central to that form of grading. So standards-based grading is criterion referenced. It's based on criteria or standards that were set up, and that's usually what we use, hopefully, in K-12 classrooms, rather than norm referenced, which is comparing students to the quote-unquote norm or normal distribution, that bell curve that is still used in universities and still used in some standardized tests as well. So how should we give feedback to students? After you have read the articles, I don't know if you've read them or not yet, but maybe after you read them, think about what do you think are the three or four most important aspects of effective feedback. And maybe try jotting those down for yourself before we move on. So one acronym that you could use, I'm not sure if acronym is the correct word here, but FAST, fair, accurate, specific, and timely. That feedback should be these four things: fair, accurate, specific, and timely. So fair, that relates to that idea of describing what you're seeing rather than passing judgment and being overly evaluative, because that's when the student, whether it's a child or an adult, might feel personally attacked by your feedback, and that is definitely a struggle. So we want to try to keep our feedback objective, focusing on the learning targets where the student is with regards to what they're learning, or maybe their process, and helping promote understanding of the learning target, so that after receiving the feedback, the student knows what they did well and how they can improve. And hopefully with this type of feedback, students will remain more engaged in the learning process. The second thing in the FAST acronym is accurate. So make sure that your feedback is related to your learning target. This again can be challenging because a lot of the times as a teacher you might see many problems with your students' products, but you don't want to overwhelm them, and you want to focus on, well, what were we trying to learn here, and focus on that, and where is that child with relation to that learning target, and direct your feedback in that way. Specific feedback. This is really important. A lot of times you'll notice, especially with student writing samples, that teachers might provide feedback like, this needs to be clearer, or great job. That's not specific enough. So in the Chapuis article, as well as in the article that we read by Brookhart, they both gave good examples of feedback that was like overly corrective versus feedback that guided the students towards improving but didn't like do the work for them. So again, that can be a little bit challenging, but with practice we all can improve on that. And then timely. So feedback needs to occur. Feedback is part of that formative assessment cycle usually, although as we are going to be reading in the chapter on conferencing, sometimes we do give feedback in a summative way as well, if it's sort of at the end of a unit. But usually feedback occurs during learning in order to help people improve, and we want to try to give that feedback in a timely manner so that students remember what they did, right? And I'm sure, same at university level as well. If you completed an assignment a week ago and your instructor is finally getting around to giving you feedback on it, you might not remember how you made the decisions that you made when you were completing your assignment. So feedback delivery is something to think about. Make sure or think about, well, what's the best way to give my students feedback, and that's going to depend on the learning target as well as the age of your students, their language proficiency. A variety of things might go into thinking about what's the best way for me to deliver feedback. Another big issue being your time. And then, you've all heard about the compliment sandwich model. We want to make sure that we keep it positive. So if you go to write something for improvement, read it over and see, okay, is there any way that I could put, maybe state it in a positive way, or state it in a way that's not focused on the learner but focused on the product. And make sure that we're not doing work for the student but guiding them towards being able to remediate their own work. Okay, so I'm going to be asking you all to look at a couple of examples of teacher feedback on a Google Doc. And I'd like for you to go ahead and look at the feedback and note what was good or what could maybe not so good about the feedback, and also what do you think the student got out of the feedback. So when you're looking at that, you can keep in mind FAST, and you can also keep in mind any of those notes that you said, these are the 3 most important things from feedback. Here's the list that I came up with, which includes FAST, which was fair, accurate, specific, and timely. So that feedback should be specific, but not overwhelming. Actionable, that's something I really like as a learner that, hey, I know what I can do with this feedback now. That it should be timely, accurate, meaning it's related to a learning target, that it's focused on the student's work or focused on their process. Sometimes that's important too. That it's descriptive, describing what you see rather than judging, and positive. And maybe most important of all is, does the student understand the feedback? Because if they don't, they ain't going to be able to use it very well.